Hi, I'm Lee Lehman, and I'm here today with Will Morris, and we're going to talk to you about the new certificate. We started out calling it medical, but then we've branched out, and we're talking about it in terms of giving a certificate in body, mind, and spirit. And there will also probably, after we get the certificate going, we'll look at having a diploma in that as well if there's enough interest. So, Will.
That's great, Lee. Yeah. And the reason that we're going towards the body mind is partially for the political elements of practice rights, worker class control systems in legal matters. So if that's not too complicated, but anyway, so my name is Will Morris, and I've been practicing medical astrology for 45 years and have more than 40,000 visits under my belt. I've laid low over the years, but I consider Lee to be one of my most important teachers in this. So I'm very happy to be engaged in this conversation with her.
Yeah, this is the first time we've actually taught together, although we've known each other for years.
Years. Mm-hmm. Indeed.
I might have to start saying decades, Will. This is getting embarrassing. We've got to stop being like this.
Age will come upon us, but
but not today.
Not today. Anyway, this is pretty exciting. This whole program that we're looking at KeplerCollege in the astrology.
Why don't you bring up the info on the program, Will, and let's talk a little bit about why we're doing this, how we see this program as different from perhaps other programs in this area, because there are several different courses in medical, very few as extensive as what we're doing. And you can see here, these are the courses that are comprise this body, mind, and spirit, or astrology of healing certificate. We've called it many things here to try to bring the pieces together for you to see what we're about. Will and I are kicking it off with MPC 301, which we teach together. And that's the foundation of the history of medical astrology. I know there are a lot of people who go, oh, history. But history really tells you a lot about how the processes of thinking about something occur. And that's what we're about here, is not to give you the history of the world, but to talk about, in a sense, both the development of ideas about medicine itself and then how astrology integrates with that. And there are basically two kinds of medical thinking that we can talk about here. And they've been viewed in some rather interesting ways by, let's call it, the straight history of medicine people. And that is that oftentimes the history of medicine has been characterized as well, people notice that people got sick. Okay, well, yeah, we kind of all get that. And then they would either blame the gods, or later they would start to develop more, let's call them, theoretical ideas about how disease happened. And there's been a tendency in the history of medicine to think of it as being in that sequence, where kind of the more religious aspect of medicine was the primitive form, and the more theoretical type was considered to be more the advanced form. That's among the things that we're going to be somewhat questioning in this process, because when you get into astrology, when you integrate in the cosmos with your thinking about medicine, it's not so black and white.
No.
You want to add some of the things that are getting you interested in as well in this course?
Well, I've long been interested in the history of medicine, East and West, and have taught it at graduate level. And I think that what we're going to be looking at here is some possibly iconoclastic concerns relative to the actual threads of origin, relative to the practice of astrology and its use in medicine, relative to the Mesopotamian agenda. And in each of these periods, there's a different maybe perspective or approach to looking at the problems of care and informing that care with the astrological information. But when we get to homeopathy in class 6 of the History and Foundations course, there is a grand conjunction transition from fire to air for the life of Samuel Hahnemann and his build of homeopathy. Well, if we look at that now, we're at a similar transition. So I think it's useful to see where things have been in order to understand where they go.
So why don't you throw up the list of topics?
Competencies, yeah, that was our first slide, but here we are.
Yeah.
Now, okay, yeah, we're developing this program from the perspective of objectives, which is how medical programs are done. How you design medical programs based on what you expect graduates to be able to do when they're done. So we applied those methods to the development of this program. And so let's just look at this first competency here, to compare and contrast knowledge of historical practices. Well, but why, Lee, should we be using Hippocratic and Galenic thought with respect to this whole conversation?
Well, some of the reasons that this is important. For example, you'll see as one of the first subpoints, Hippocratic, Aristotelian, and Stoic systems of humoral thought. Now, if you don't know anything about what this just said, do not panic. Okay, it's our job to teach this to you. And if you knew everything on this slide, you would already be done with the program. But for example, there are two primary methods of looking at the elements of humors traditionally, and that's the Aristotelian and the Stoic. How you will interpret the body in health and in disease is different according to which method you use. And historically, almost all herbalists have used one of those two methods and not the other. And so one of the things is, if you know this, you know which system the astrologer or the herbalist or any other one who's practicing natural medicine is working with. So these are kind of identification points you need to see. It's a matter of being able to recognize patterns. It's like how many of you, for example, have learned how to identify which school of astrology somebody is practicing. The way that someone who is doing esoteric astrology is going to use a different vocabulary than somebody who's doing horary astrology. And it's knowing how these ideas have changed over time, which is extremely important to your practice.
Yeah, and that humoral concept of most essentially hot, cold, moist, and dry is really pre-modern. So Persia, India, China, all these countries, Greece, are using these ways of thought. And so when I first was practicing astrology and wanted to go study medicine, I felt extremely fortunate that I made the choice to go into Chinese medical school in the early 80s because it was humorally centered, and the astrological view fits like hand in glove with humoral thought. And as such, as a herbalist, I couldn't practice without this knowledge base as a part of the consideration. What I call the field of signs. There are signs which we see, lab work, pulse, face, all these things. But part of that field of signs is the astrological data, the sky. The sky is a critical feature. Tibetan medicine, all the early cultures had the sky as part of their due consideration. What I call an eco-psychosocial view, where the entire ecosystems of cosmos are considered simultaneously with that of the conditions the person's experiencing their symptoms.
Our second point is apply astrological analysis and critical thought to enhance applications of historical, medical, and non-orthodox protocols designed to enhance the client's bodily, mental, or spiritual experience. Now, we know historically that through the time from roughly the time of Galen, you have a form of astrological medicine. Before that, you have astrological pieces. For example, the development of something like warrior electional was going on before that time. And so there were pieces involved there, if only through measuring omens at particular astrological times. But as the idea of a medical astrology is developing, this is taking place in different cultures. This is taking place with somewhat different medicines, because as Willis mentioned, the Chinese and the Ayurvedic systems, for example, these are three of the great medical cultures historically. And there are some differences in approach, which are useful to be aware of. And not everybody agreed at any point in time. So there were different theories about how medical matters worked, how astrological matters. And so again, this is very helpful to us and to you as you're learning this material, is to see how to put it into perspective with other astrological practices going on at the time.
Right. And one of the things is called an isomorphism, the consistencies between one system and another. All medicine, whether it's astrological or earlier traditions or contemporary models of care, have these two features in common. They're isomorphic. They are time or process and location. So again, we have to locate a problem and we have to identify the process, and the astrological consideration does that very well. Well, the different cultures who apply these methods are possibly engaged in differences of opinion about certain matters, and our ability to critically analyze, compare, and contrast that information allows us to come to a sense of our own place with the work, which is ultimately where each of us have to be.
All of these ideas will allow you to work with some of these different cultural and theoretical aspects within your own practice. And when we talk about communities of care, what we're talking about, among other things, is what kind of healing methods are used. Now, this program is not a program in teaching you to be part of a particular community of care, but we'll be presenting some of the ways that it has been done. These days, much of the use of medical astrology is outside of the modern system of medicine. Not all of it, of course, because actually, in terms of my practice, where Will works more in the sense of working with the patients, I work more as an astrologer. So my primary clients are having medical questions, so to speak, either through horary or in other astrological disciplines. But the communities of care include the fact that if you're working as an acupuncturist, as Will is licensed to do, how you work with that may be a bit different than someone who is working as an herbalist, where they may have to be licensed as an herbalist, they may not. How this works is going to be different than somebody who has an MD. So we also need to look at this across the different ways that people are working with their own medical needs.
Very good. Yeah, and that whole concept of standard of care are the values that we hold as providers of care to our communities of interest, and how we interface with the other communities of care around us, such that we're making good referrals at good points in time in the best interest of our clients.
Now, we've listed here a prerequisite to be in the program, and so now I'll give you some of the ideas about how this fits into your Kepler experience. We're talking about a certificate. The KeplerCollege General Certificate is considered the prerequisite for the entire program. That's because what we cannot do in this certificate is stop to spend time about what is the meaning of retrograde? What does it mean if a planet is in the 11th house? What does the word angular mean? What does the word reception mean? What does the word quincunx mean? Any of these more general ideas in astrology, we expect you to know going in here. Now, I'm sure there are people who come to, people who have been coming to Kepler for various courses, who may not be Kepler graduates. Maybe people out in the community who've been practicing astrology for 10, 20, 30 years want to get into this program, but because you weren't a Kepler graduate, you want to know whether you can take the certificate. Well, we are in the process of working out a way for you to be able to demonstrate your knowledge so that you can enter into it directly. If you want to take a course, but you don't want to take it within the program to get a certificate, what you will have to do is what we call audit within the Kepler community. That means that you won't get the course for credit, but you can take it nonetheless. And that's something you can talk to the Kepler staff about how an audit works. But in general, when you're in the program, you will have to meet whatever prerequisites the particular course has. And one thing to know is, especially as we are recording this information for you, just as the program is starting. So there are a few things that I have to say now that won't be so true later on. Depending on the enrollment that we get, to be quite honest, how often courses run will be determined partly by how many people we have in the courses. The sequence may not be exactly the sequence of courses that we're showing you here. So you may not be able to take the course you want next at precisely the time that you want to take it. But at this time, we expect to run all of the courses within the certificate within a 2-year period. But that could change at another point in time. So you may not be taking them in precisely the order that we're showing you the courses.
We've talked about these first 2 courses a bit, foundations and elements, humors, and temperaments. What of the physical, mental, and spiritual diseases that are prevalent? Well, to be honest, throughout human history, but we're seeing certain nuances of what I call zeitgeist trauma, the impact of the social systems on individuals and their state of mind seem to be amplified at this time. In any regard, the astrological view on the matter becomes important. Lee?
So this is something, and this is also part of why, as we thought about the various names for this program, that body, mind, and spirit came so much to mind, is that virtually all forms of astrological medicine ask this question. And it's not saying that a disease can occur only in the body, only in the mind, or only in the spirit. It's often mixed and all sorts of confusing. But it's to get a general tenor of where do you start. And that in our history is something that people brought up over and over. If you have a spiritual disease, yes, you can treat the body. But if you just treat the body, you aren't really encompassing the nature of this issue. So this to us is a very pivotal piece. Anatomy and melasthesia. The word melasthesia, this is one you can take out of this little section and impress your friends. Melasthesia is how rulerships are assigned to various parts of the body, various diseases. And all those lovely diagrams, like even the one that's on the course description for our history class here, where you see what are called zodiac man or zodiac woman, are melasthesia. It's the idea that the area ruled by Gemini is the shoulders, arms, and hands. So it's being able to make those equivalency. And also, the anatomy is taught by a naturopath at this point in time, and that's Kira Sutherland, and she's very interested in anatomy, as she should be, and as all of us should be, because part of what she'll also be conveying is what the history of what the people who came up with these rulerships thought these parts of the body were doing. And because they didn't have microscopes, they didn't have a lot of the physiological equipment that we have that has allowed us to gain quite a bit of knowledge. On the other hand, they had their observations. And so it's important to know from what logic these factors came. Decumbatures is taught by Marcus Paget. And this is a key piece of medical astrology that we almost can't overemphasize. It's a decumbature is when somebody has a medical event. That event could be you break your leg. That event could be that you collapse on the floor. It may be really, exquisitely obvious that it's going on, or it may be that the person is the one who experiences it. And so this is a crucial thing, is to be able to read decumbatures.
The anatomical views that come forward in Malathesia, it's a bizarre technical term of Western world. In India, they call it Kala Purusha, Kala meaning time, Purusha, the whooshing through time into this physical form that has a relationship to cosmos as well as the body that we're possessing. And those concepts are extant back into Mesopotamia, and they extend up through India, China, and Greece. So we're looking at some roots, origins of this type of thinking, that if we're talking about anatomy, there must be some individualized concept, that it didn't all just perform in service to the courts of royalty in those various civilizational events or cultural events within that time period. As it comes forward, we see the epitome of the decumbature concept taking place within the Renaissance. And so that becomes a large part of the basis for the decumbature perspective. And then in the model of astrological analysis, I'll let you speak to that, Lee.
Sure. Basically, what we look at in the model of astrological analysis is what houses are used primarily in examining disease. Now, there are two uses of houses here. One is that in pretty much all forms of astrological medicine, each house is involved with different parts of the body. So, and the lists are different between, the different cultural zones. So, if, for example, in the Western style of medical analysis, if you're looking for the heart, it's the fifth house. And so knowing that is an important thing. But if you're looking for generally, for example, somebody asks you a question about what is this thing I'm having? What is the cause of it? You will probably be working with a mixture of the houses that relate to health, and health is different than disease. And that's always so important to remember, and oftentimes so hard for the beginner to grasp. But you look in the house of health, of disease, of the physician, because of course, so critical in these matters is that the physician is able to treat the condition that they are being approached to treat. There's the question of whether or not you're getting an accurate reading of what's actually wrong. So it's working with these houses and understanding how to put them together that we examine the model of astrological analysis. And then finally, we do a certification of competency. This is just 391. It's basically a course to make sure that the practical material that's taught in 306, 311, 316, and 321 and 331 is something you've had a chance to test. This is actually a lot of theory. And 391 is designed to make sure that you don't get through the theory without having actually applied it. So 391 is basically a practicum to take you through that process of making sure that you're clear on the application of everything that's gone on before that.
And that certification takes place oftentimes through case-based presentations, but there's an array. We assist the learners in understanding different forms of presentation of their attainment competencies. And that weaves back into some threads that take place throughout the coursework, problems such as evidence-based practice, its beliefs and assumptions, and how we come to terms with that as astrologers in our critical thinking and so forth. And that kind of material thumbs up under certification of competency as part of the dialogues that take place between the members of this learning community. Okay. So now we've got a couple of charts here as some examples. Here's the decumbrature. This is a chart for the moment of onset of a sudden hearing loss, following an extended amount of travel, and combined with orofacial congestion, sinus congestion, and slight earplugs. Now, this person had hearing loss as a child, but this is in the opposite ear. It's taking place as an adult, and this is just the consultation chart. So why? Excuse me, not the consultation, but with the decumbrature, which is something that has to be taken into consideration given the vagaries of hospitalist practices with respect to recording birth time. Is it cutting the cord? Is it the breath? Was it when I got done washing the baby or tending to whatever the baby needed in order to get it into its mama's arms or into someone else's arms before getting a moment to record it? So with decumbrature, it can become more accurate. Of course, with the consultation chart, even far more accurate. But sudden hearing loss, we have a few considerations. I'll just start off, if that's okay with the.
Yeah, sure. It was your cake.
If we look at one of the first places I'm going to look in a chart such as this is going to be the sixth house and its cusp. That'll be the health, but also the disease process. And we see Rahu, the north node of the moon. I like to personalize the name rather than just north node of the moon, kind of objectifying. I was personalize it, but it's conscious moment, and I make that choice. But this is a cardinal sign. It suggests a sudden onset, and hopefully it also suggests a rather quick recovery. The ruler thereof, of course, is Mars over here on the first. And so it suggests that there's a behavioral component on the part of the client with respect to the onset of this condition. That the condition may very well be in the head, right? Because it's Aries here, but it's also first house. So we got a double on the head. Any thoughts emergent for you there, Lee?
Well, it's a triple, because of course it's also Mars.
Yeah.
Right here.
Yeah, right.
So pretty much all the different ways you could say head are there. Now, some of you may be noticing already, if you've ever been my student, you're noticing, oh gee, Will's using Chiron. He's got Sedna on here. He's using tropical equal houses, and why hasn't we shot him down?
Right.
It's terrible stuff. Now, this is actually to point out something very important about our philosophy in this whole program. The different people who are teaching in it are teaching in it from different philosophical systems. And my job is not to convince Will to use Regiomontanus all the time, or to skip Sedna or Chiron in his interpretations. So we're working from multicultural, historical time periods. What you will get is individual instructors establishing a kind of a consistency in the way that they are showing it to you. But this is not about an argument of house systems. So that's one of the very important things that is important to mention from the beginning. If I'm looking at this from the classical perspective and we're talking about deafness, the first place I would be looking is where's Saturn, because in the historical system, Saturn, the old term was surdity, and that involves deafness. So So I would definitely be looking at how Saturn is placed in the chart, and what I might do with the fact that Saturn is a sign that it's not happy in. And so that's a piece of this, but it's not in the classical tradition. It's not peregrine. There is space here, so it's not, again, Will had already established with the cardinality of the chart that there's a good chance that this can be quick onset, quick leaving. And so again, here Saturn is not completely destroyed in this situation, but there is something fundamental to this. A fourth house can represent earlier in the life. It can represent hereditary, for example. It could represent factors relating to the parents, especially the father. So take it away, Will.
Very, very good. Yeah, just to extend on that, the problem of houses, there is no primacy necessarily that is enjoyed by any particular what's called an abstraction. To divide the house into 12 segments is an abstraction of the mind, however it gets done. And so the real question for me is that in my process of analyzing clinically, which house system best answers my question? If I'm looking at development of herbal formulas, as we say here in Canada, herbs, if I'm looking at herbal formulas, I need to know a Reggio house cusp in order to get a nuanced house scenario that can be run through the table of dignities. And that's not possible with this, but this particular method allows me to see meridian-based concepts very quickly and readily and clearly, with no confusion about what's sitting where, because the 12 meridians is the same as the 12 houses, the same with the 12 signs, and we're looking at different orders of magnitude from the person through the sky to out to cosmos. And so, but in any regard, that north node there on the 6th house cusp is consistent with an infection in my experience, and certainly enough, there was an infection in the head. She chose to fly, and then the very next morning had a very sharp loss of hearing. And so that consideration right there affects how I'm going to approach it, and I will reconstruct this chart in Reggio in order to construct a herb formula for the treatment. Anything else on this chart, Lee?
Well, yes, as as you know, I'm looking at this cold. So
yeah.
So the other thing I would note here, if you're looking at it from a humoral perspective, you've got the ascendant is Scorpio, and you've got Mars and the Sun right there. They would all be considered to be cold and wet. The moon is in Aquarius, which would be considered as an air sign to be hot and wet. And so those are, in many respects, those are the big three in temperament analysis. And we should also look at the part of fortune, which is hot and dry. But the basic tendencies of this chart are moving toward wet, which of course makes me think about phlegm as being an important part of the disease structure. And of course, those are exactly why Will's going to be looking at Reg to then be working out a formula, because it's when you're looking at humors and you're looking at this process of a chart, what you're saying is what seems to be out of balance in the chart. And so that's the kind of determination that you're going to want to be examining. The part of fortune can be important in looking at the health of the chart, but what you're also looking and saying, where are the planets? And planets tend to rate more strongly in terms of actual strength than points do. And there's as I'm looking around the chart, Mercury is the only fire. So this is not like a maximum hot chart or a maximum dry chart. So that's another piece of what you'd be looking at.
Yeah, very, very good. Yeah, that cold, wet situation is pretty well dominated. My experience is that signals such as Mars and Sun in Scorpio, Mars also ruling the 6th house, Sun ruling the 10th house of treatment, interestingly enough, that emphasis right there could knock any quantitative collection of data relative to other planets and their humors right off the chart. This one of the things we have to look at is how does our gaze approach the chart? We can use it in the sequential analysis of different specialists in the matter, but oftentimes what catches the eye most immediately first is also something to consider. Okay, that's good. There's of course so much more. The 10th house and in the nature of treatment that the treatment suggests is hot and dry, being that Leo, there, the part of fortune in Leo and fire sign up there is certainly suggesting, even though its ruler, the sun, is in a cold, wet sign, there's an impulse towards this. I don't know what your thoughts are on that matter, because this can be a matter of debate in certain schools of thought. But I would be looking at using probably some warming and drying herbs and foods for this.
Many of the 17th century physicians would be going through exactly that same process, Will, because one of the ideas that goes back as far as Hippocrates is if you have a cold and wet situation, do you treat it with cold and wet, which is to say homeopathically, and I'm not talking about Hahnemann, but like treats like, in the earlier sense, or do you treat it antagonistically? And so something cold and wet could be treated with something hot and dry. And yeah, the 10th house relating to treatment would give you that idea that maybe that's the way to go.
Certainly, if we go, I mean, there's a very clear imperative towards using that similar kind of treatment, the cold and wet, and it opposes the hot, dry nature of the 6th house. I happen to know that this person also has some underlying coldness that has to be addressed. So when I see a complex suggestion of hot and cold at the same time, oftentimes I'll do both in the build of a formula called harmonizing. And collections of planets at the transition point between night and day, such as we see here with this opposition right here, also suggests the need for harmonizing the hot-cold. We look at it just from the Chinese perspective, yin and yang, but that's certainly departing the traditional narratives in the European tradition, but can be useful at times. Okay, let's look at the next one. Here's the consultation chart. If I'm not sure when the disease actually onset, this person knew precisely, without question. But if I'm not convinced, I may rely more heavily on the consultation chart. We look at the consultation chart and we see that Mars again is ruling the disease process. Okay, so I've got a connection in there and that feels pretty good. Mars up here coming in towards Saturn. Saturn's already been established as an ear matter. Jupiter and Mercury here in the house of the ears, 11th, 3rd and 11th, depending, 2nd and 11th. These houses are often involved in ear problems. Any other comments on the consultation? I always do a consultation chart it's it gets me out of a world of trouble, because I have come to the place where I think that the consultation chart is summative of all other events that have taken that person's gone through their whole life, and here we are in this moment right now. And such that the consultation chart possesses certain virtues of the totality of the experience.
I think one of the things we'll talk about this some in our history course, and then it will come up, I think, at various points later on as we discuss not only how you analyze a chart in terms of health and disease, but then, of course, we want to be able to give some practical advice too within our ethical and legal guidelines. But I think one of the things when you said, and I think this is so important in looking at these charts, in a sense, and Hahnemann said this probably more clearly than anybody else, that the disease you have now is the sum of all the diseases you have ever had. And if we want to translate that into a slightly more astrologically based statement, it's that if disease represents an imbalance, which has been the primary theory since at least Hippocrates, if it represents a primary imbalance, that imbalance isn't what happened yesterday. That imbalance is what has happened your entire life. And we don't often think about that in astrology, because we have a tendency now, I think, to think of our astrological process as transit-based. And right now I'm having Neptune opposite my moon. And so this has certain consequences, and then Neptune will move away from my moon, and then maybe I'm having, Mars square my sun. And we think in this kind of sequential way. And by the time we get done with the Saturn return, that, okay, well, what's next? Well, what this is saying in this process of body, mind, and spirit on the level of is it balanced or is it not, is that yes, you can get past a disease, you can have a disease cured, but then you have the history of the disease. And we are now the sum of all that history that we have ever had in our lives. And so that's part of what you're viewing in this process, in trying to understand how this is impacting the individual. And sometimes it's that greater process that you may see more in a consultation chart. It's when many of you, we will do the consultation chart in this program. Some of you may already be doing that in your natal work, because it's useful there too on a non-medical level. But it's also another way to look at the difference between reading the chart and reading the consultation chart.
Right. It's a matter of perspective, and the perspective of the gaze from the transits down onto the chart, or at the moment of the consultation, from where we sit as the astrologer out into the sky at that moment. Those shifts in perspective allow for greater insight. And oftentimes cracking a case is, when it's not coming as we would expect or would prefer, is often better achieved merely by a shift in perspective. So this chart possesses a resonance with the previous chart. It possesses resonance with the case, and one of the things I'm always looking for is, is it connected? How hard and heavy is it connected? But that'll be some of the material that we discuss throughout the program. And let's go to the next slide. This is a little bit more on the course that's coming up. Lee and I will be working on together, and these are some of the topics addressed in this History and Foundations course? We've already discussed the importance of understanding roots. How does a certain way of thinking come into being? How do we choose whether we're going to adopt that way of thinking and viewing reality in our approach to care?
Yes, and it's always good to contextualize it, that this is within the context of care, because we're not all putting emphasis on medical just as a theoretical way to impress your friends and colleagues at an astrology conference. We're always looking at how does this reflect back to the person who's experiencing it. The history of medicine is critical to understanding how to apply the philosophy of medicine. And it's also a good place to start to understand some of the terminology of medicine, because the terminology has, like in every other field of knowledge, changed and evolved. By looking at the roles and responsibilities of healers over time, we understand perhaps better our contemporary situations. When Culpeper was the great doctor of his period, for a period of, for that period of time in the 17th century, his training was way different than somebody in an MD program or a naturopathy program or an acupuncture program or a massage therapist program is today. What we know about herbs today is massively more than any of the traditional systems knew, because we know about herbs globally now. And so one of the things we have to learn is how we can apply that. There's always been an idea that it's better to be working with herbs in your immediate area, herbs that are fresh now, where you could literally go out and pluck them if it's not in the middle of winter, and then maybe still you may be getting them from under the snow. But you can't always do that in a world of cities. And so we have to be able to think about what were the principles behind these ideas. How can we still get them to work in a contemporary situation? And that's also a big piece for us of why this material is so important.
Excellent. This is the. Oh,
go ahead, Will.
We're going to say something else about this?
No, go.
This is the course that we'll be offering this spring. It begins April 6th, 2024. And I'm very excited about doing this course. There's a bunch of new material. I believe that we'll be cracking some beliefs about with respect to the practice of astrology relative to medicine, and also cutting through to some depth on some important personages in the history of the development of medical astrology. And I know one of your favorites, of course, Lee, is Ibn Ezra and his form of thought. We'll be looking at the way these people practice, and we have things to say about that.
Yes, this is, this really is for us the start of the program. Now, as far as the program is concerned, if for any reason you can't sign up for it now because you have too many other Kepler courses you've already signed up for, which of course would be the only reason you couldn't sign up for it, I'm sure, that you will be able to go into the program itself without starting with this course. There are a few cases in this process where you do have to take some of the courses in sequence, but this is not one of them. So, if you're interested in finding out what medical astrology is and you haven't committed to this as a certification, we also welcome you there as well. So we hope to be seeing many of you in the near future.
Excellent. Thank you, Lee.
Thank you, Will.
Yeah, you bet. We hope to see you soon. And thank you for paying attention all the way through this whole conversation, which we plan to have many, many more.